So hopefully from that you get a bit more idea and you can sort of resonate a little bit about when some of our young people come in and they are more sensitive to some things, how and why that may have happened. And we might have some examples in our heads of young people that that may specifically work with. So when I've created this skills booklet, I've split it into 3 sections. The first one being mindfulness, which is something that we can all do, we can all teach, and we can all use at any point. It should be something that's practiced at least daily. So even things which I'll talk about in a minute, but just reading before you go to bed and just focusing on that book. When you go to think about the day, bring yourself back to the book. That's daily mindfulness, because you're training your brain to be able to focus and concentrate on that one thing. The other section is emotional regulation, where the skills within this part of the booklet is to help you change your emotions, to bring your emotions back down, or to try and bring yourself back into your window of tolerance. And then the final section is distress tolerance. And these are skills where we want to teach our children who may be using self-harm as a coping mechanism, or lashing out particularly with violence, that some of these skills can be helpful when they have those feelings or have those emotions and they're not quite sure what they can do to be able to cope with them. So you'll notice on my little face chart thing I've created underneath, it sort of gives the idea of where these skills might be used. So mindfulness, you can't use mindfulness if you're in distress. So if you've got a child, or you're in a situation where a child is incredibly angry, and at the point of rage, trying to get them to do what we did at the beginning and talk about a story, you can't do that. It won't work. You have to regulate the emotions and bring the distress down back into the window of tolerance for that to be effective for a period of time. So the first section we've got then is mindfulness. You will also notice, I know some of this can be quite confusing. A lot of it is from Martha Linehan, a psychologist. So I've tried to break it down into as easier parts as possible. So I've coloured them and I've put the same symbol on each skill that I'm using. Once I've done the training today, you will receive a copy of the booklet via email. So I'm hoping by then it will all make sense to you. So the first ones we're going to look at then are the blue ones, which are mindfulness. So mindfulness isn't a form of meditation. This is what I said at the start. It's not about being religious or spiritual, which was something that I thought naively quite a while ago. The aim of it is to help control your mind and put you in control of what reality actually is. There's 3 main types: mindfully observe, mindfully describe, and mindfully participate. The first one is mindfully observe. So if you've got children who are having just a particularly bad day, we often will engage them in conversations and ask them about what they've been up to. But mindfulness observe is quite a good one, where we can literally ask them to look at things, but not just looking wide, sometimes bringing things closer. So for example, picking up a leaf or a flower and describing it really closely. So looking down to the lines, looking down to the colours. It could be that we're just sitting outside looking at things. It could be listening to sounds, could be listening to music, but not just having music on, actually listening to the music, listening to the beat, listening to the different instruments that you can hear. It could be using smells or eating. When you're eating, what are the textures? What are the feelings? Body scanning is another one. And an interesting one, which sometimes you don't realise until you do it, mindful swallowing. So mindful eating is quite interesting, where you are chewing and you are just being mindful of when you get that urge to swallow. We all do it naturally. We don't even think about swallowing. Our body does it automatically. But by being mindful, we're training our brain to think about that action that we do every day. So there are a couple examples of mindful observe. Then we've got mindfulness describe, where it is about describing what we can see or what we can hear. And mindfulness participate, so doing something but throwing your all into it and doing that one thing. but being mindful that you're doing that one thing. So we might sometimes hum or whistle whilst doing something, but we're not necessarily focusing on the actual tune that we're whistling. So the main thing about being mindful is about focusing on that one particular thing. I've rushed through mindfulness because I want to get onto the other sections. The main thing to say about mindfulness is children need to be calm when you do it, and it is about training. So if you can introduce things every day, just little by little, it might be that you give everyone some mindfulness colouring and ask them to colour in silence. It might be that you give them something and ask them to describe it to you, but describe it in detail. It's about giving them the ability to think and to focus on one thing, because sometimes when our brains are all over the place or we feel like we've got a lot to worry about, it can be quite difficult to zone into one important thing. The next section then is emotional regulation, and these are used to help us change our emotions. These are things where children may have had fallings out. It may be where they're not sure what their emotions are. We're not at the point here where children are in distress, so we're not talking here about self-harm. We're not talking here about physical lashing out. Here we are, or becoming emotional in a particular social situation. So the first one is check the facts. All of these skills, by the way, I haven't made the skills up. The skills are all through Martha Linehan's book. I've just sort of presented them in a way that can be more easily understood, hopefully. So many emotions are set off by thoughts or by events. Interpretations of events, and not the events their actual selves. So it's important for us to actually think about what is happening in a situation. And the amount of times we hear children say such and such doesn't like me, or they were rude, or this person said this, we actually have to work out what the emotion is and what the facts are. So the way that we do that is ask what the emotion is. So a lot of children find this really difficult to label. So it may be, if you are going to use some of these skills, helpful to use the emotion wheels. And even now at 31, sometimes I find labeling my emotions quite difficult, particularly if I'm not sure when you think about the situation, is it nervousness, or is it embarrassment, or is it anger, or is it sadness? So sorry, I think someone's trying to come in. Yeah. So once we've worked out what that emotion is, we need to work out what's prompting that emotion. So it's thinking specifically, okay, I'm feeling angry. Well, why? Because of this, and this, but it's not. So what was the event? What actually happened? The next one's quite important, and actually we have more than these, and children have more of these than we actually realise. So what are the interpretations, what are the thoughts, and what are the assumptions? Because when we have young people who are quite distressed, often there are more assumptions than facts. So it's about helping them break this down, think of different possible interpretations. Am I assuming a threat? What is the catastrophe, and does the emotion fit the facts? So, when we've got upset, why are we upset? What happened? Does that emotion fit the facts? So what we're not doing is we're not saying that their emotions aren't valid, but what we are trying to say is this is the situation, so helping them actually break that down. I was trying to think of an example then, but that didn't work. The other one, again, we're still in emotion regulation, is opposite action. And this is a key one, particularly when people are struggling with depression or anxiety. So it's when you can change your emotional reactions by being the opposite. So you don't want to go into lesson, or you don't want to see someone, or you want to do something else. By doing the opposite action, you are turning that around and you are doing the literal opposite. I don't know, for example, if you feel afraid, face a thing that gives you anxiety, confront that fear. Now, a lot of our young people will need support to do this, but we often find that once we're facing those fears, it actually reduces that anxiety with it because they then have that opportunity of facing it. If you're angry, take a vacation or take a break from the situation or the person that you're angry with. If it means avoiding someone, um, it's about having empathy for the other person. So instead of being angry at them, the opposite action would be to try and have empathy for them. So, okay, I'm really angry at them, but if I was to feel sorry for this person in this situation, what might I think about? And with that, working with young people, it can be really difficult, particularly when they're angry with each other. But trying to get them to flip it on its side and try and see someone in a different light can be quite useful. If you're feeling sad, don't avoid the situation that you're upset with. Don't isolate yourself. Get out and do something to keep busy. Now, you know, lots of us here will struggle with our mental health, and I struggle with anxiety. And sometimes I want to just go home and not see people. But sometimes actually getting out the house and going to that situation that I didn't feel comfortable in, I can feel 10 times better by the time I get home. Doesn't always work, but opposite action is a key one. So instead of avoidance and feeding that avoidance by allowing children to avoid certain situations, opposite action can be quite useful. It's also worth saying a lot of these strategies won't work with every child. It's about you guys knowing your children and understanding these to the best that you can and sort of picking up what you think would work best. Um, ABC Please is an interesting one. This one's split across 2 slides. So it's about accumulating positive emotions, building mastery, and coping ahead. Coping ahead is a key one, and this is something we can really support the children with, particularly if we know that there's something coming up that is causing them anxiety. It's about what can we put in place to help them before it gets there. So then the please side. So you've got ABC, please. So the ABC is short term and doing things that are positive or possible now. Building mastery, so making sure that you're doing things that make you feel competent and effective, and that importantly making you happy. So focus on the things you're good at. So if we're working with children who are good at music or good at art, let's build on that. Let's focus on that. Let's do some of that for a little bit and coping ahead of time. Then the please side is one thing that when people aren't feeling well, they can often neglect. And it is about please, and it is about looking after yourself. So ensuring that we are treating physical illness, that we are eating well, that we are avoiding mood altering substances, that we are balancing sleep, and that we are getting exercise. I wanted to do a breakout now, but I'm going to do the next section and then I'll go back and do a breakout because I'm just concerned about time. Okay, the last section is distress tolerance, and these are the skills that we want to use when it's difficult or impossible to change a situation. They're used to help us cope and survive during a crisis. So this is when someone is absolutely out of their window of tolerance and they're not coping. So this is where we might have a child who is incredibly distressed, who, you know, maybe trying to do their fight or flight, someone that's trying to abscond, someone that might be trying to fight. Whether that's sort of physical or emotional, it is when we are at absolute crisis point. And these are the skills that I share with our students who may be engaging in self-harm at home, because these are skills that actually could support them when they're not around us. So the first one is the stop skill. And this is a key one, and it might be that actually some children, I've given them cards where they've put cards in their bedroom, or I used to have one girl that used to harm herself with a candle, and she wanted that candle in her room because that was part of her mindfulness, but it was that she put a little stop sticker next to the candle. And it basically means that if you are going to engage in an unhelpful or a harmful skill, then you basically stop. You freeze, you don't move. Your emotions may want to make you move, but you need to stop and stay in control. And this gives your brain an opportunity to just stop and think. So instead of just going and doing something, it's about stopping, trying to take a step back from the situation and taking a deep breath. I think sometimes we take for granted how much breathing can change our emotions. Observe. If we can really tackle mindfulness and get students to be able to self-observe and be able to body scan, this observe about noticing what is going on inside you can be really helpful. It takes a long time, but students being able to observe these thoughts and feelings can be really helpful. And proceed mindfully. So acting with awareness. So instead of thinking when something was about to happen to just lash out and physically harm someone or physically get something that would harm them, by stopping and thinking, they are then having more of a choice and they are having more time to process their thoughts and make a better choice for their action. The next one is pros and cons. Now, I think, even though Marsha has put this a lot through distress tolerance, I think pros and cons could also be done a lot within emotional regulation, particularly if you're balancing on whether something is worth doing or not. And this is something quite simple that, is a skill that we might not think of as skill that we might do all the time because we might have the skills to be able to balance and weigh things up in our heads. But some of our children don't have that ability. So pros and cons can be quite helpful. When you're deciding between a course of action, so it could be engage in harmful behaviour or giving up or to avoid something. So it might be that they're, I don't know, we might have young smokers and they're tempted to smoke again. Well, let's think about the pros and cons of it. And you do need a little bit more time to do the pros and cons, I think. So for me, I would put it in emotional regulation and not distress tolerance. But as she's put it in distress tolerance, I have kept it there. But it'd be quite helpful to see the pros and cons down on paper. And it can help people have a good reflection. The tip scale is one of the ones which I've used the most, I think, with our young people. And if I must say, it is the most effective. So if there's one skill that you took away from today that you could start using immediately, I would take the tip scale and I would go straight to temperature. And I'd like you to try it yourselves. So next time you feel yourself feeling emotional, where you want to cry, or you feel angry, where you feel sort of your blood rush to the top of your head, sorry, if you can reduce your temperature, we do tend to say by submerging your head in cold water for about 30 seconds, but in school I haven't done that with the children. We've done splashing the face with cold water or an ice pack on the forehead or the wrists. And by reducing your temperature, it automatically brings down your emotional distress. Don't ask me why. It is scientifically proven. And this is a skill that I've used myself a lot, as well as shared with the children. And the feedback from the children has been really good. So next time you feel like that, try it. Because I couldn't believe the difference it could make. And people often say, when people have been upset, go and wash your face with cold water. That's the same we've heard for years, but I never actually fully understood why. And now I do. If it brings down your core temperature, then it can really change your emotions. The opposite to that is intense aerobic exercise. So when you're sat there exhausted because you've been upset or, you're feeling angry and you're ready to lash out, children, it can be easier, even if it is just a lap around the playground, or adults, it might be that you get yourself changed and you get yourself to the gym. But increasing exercise for 20 to 30 minutes can help regulate emotions and it can bring you back down. It's like when people feel that things are bad and you go to sleep and you wake up the next morning and things automatically feel better. The situation hasn't changed, but you may feel better. It's because your heart rate has changed to as it was the night before. By changing your temperature and your heart rate can change your emotions. Those two are the ones that work the fastest, in my opinion, and has been the most successful. The other one is paired muscle relaxation. And This is better once people have done breathing. So once you know that children or yourselves have mastered breathing, paired muscle relaxation is really interesting, because if you can imagine that someone is anxious, perhaps having a panic attack, sorry, perhaps having a panic attack, then their heart rate is increased and they are focusing on their heart rate. By doing paired muscle relaxation, you are tensing two muscle groups at the same time as trying to breathe. So you're breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth, and then you're clenching your fists for 3 to 5 seconds, or 7 seconds, sorry, and then you're releasing and doing it again. And by focusing then, squeezing as hard as you can, even if you're sat there now and you're just chilled and you're just relaxed, if you squeeze both your fists together as hard as you can, those with false nails, it can be quite sore, but if you squeeze as hard as you can for 7 seconds and then relax, you will feel a reduction of tension in your arms. And by your brain then focusing on that activity whilst focusing on breathing, it is a distraction, but it tricks your brain into thinking it needs to focus on something else. The self-soothe skill is literally as it sounds: self-soothe, self-help. They are doing things that are pleasant for you. We need to try and build self-soothe boxes, whether that's mentally or whether it's physical, with our children who really struggle, because it can be a really good go-to thing. So when children are starting to struggle, if they know that they can go straight to what's on their list, whether that's listening to music or whether that's having a certain song that they listen to, or whether that's a certain activity, it can help them get them back into their frame of mind. Now, again, self-soothe can be difficult depending on the level of distress. So again, I would perhaps put it in emotion regulation, but it can be used in either. But whenever we're teaching the children about these skills, it's really important to teach them that one of the most important things is to look after themselves. So it's going back to that ABC, please. The most important skill is for them to be taking care of themselves. And when they're taking care of themselves, it will improve their mental health. Body scan is a good one. So we're basically taking several deep breaths and you think about a different part of your body one at a time. And my friend does this really, really well. She's got a son with Down syndrome and he doesn't always recognise his emotions or his pain thresholds, or pinpointing where things are. So if he hurts himself when he's upset, she uses this as a distraction mechanism. So say he's fallen over and he's hurt his knee and he's crying, she doesn't say, "How's your knee?" The first thing she said is, "How's your ears?" And you flick your brain, his brain goes away from his knee and thinks, "Yeah, my ears are okay. Okay, how are your fingertips?" "Yeah, my fingertips are okay." "All right, how is your toe?" And by the time they've actually done them, he's calmed himself down, because it's taken that idea of that pain away. And a lot of it's similar to when we ask children who are having anxiety attacks to tell us what they can see, what they can feel, what they can hear, because it's about scanning different areas and physically moving their brain to focus on different areas. When you really think about it, you are all sat there right now and you all have knees, you all have toes, you all have ankles, you all have the back of the neck, you all have an eyeball. None of you are particularly thinking about any of those things, but they're all moving. And I'm sure, as I've just listed each of those, your brains have gone to certain places and thought, "Oh yeah, I've got an ear. Oh yeah, can I feel the back of my neck?" And the more you focus, the more areas you can feel. Focus on the back behind your knees. All of a sudden, you can feel it like a sensation. So body scan is quite interesting. So you're just breathing in and out. And the way I picture it, I sometimes do it before I go to sleep, not in distress, but just as a mindfulness before bed, where you just think about every little bit of the end of your bodies, go to each finger, and it makes you really tired because it actually just makes you feel calm because you're just focusing on small things. You can tell I did so much research because I just do really odd things. I used to just do normal things, whereas now I will do things like body scan overnight. But it is a good skill because once you've got it, when you are in distress, you can go back to it. Willing hands is another one. This is really good in interviews or in difficult conversations. However you're sat now, if you literally just put both hands on your knees and twist them up towards the ceiling, don't close your eyes, but you immediately feel more relaxed. So a lot of us sit with our hands face down in our laps, but by turning our hands up, as if we're about to catch some water or something, it changes the way that our muscles are and it generally loosens up our body. And I guess it's similar to the psychology of when we're talking to people when you've got your arms folded or your arms open. I guess it's a similar sort of concept. Okay. In terms of the actual skills booklet, I know I've done it incredibly quickly, and some of you are probably sat there like I have no idea. If anyone wants to go through these in any more detail, I will do. Just send me an email. I want to have a look now at a couple of other little things that are added, some of the things that we do. Right now, I'm not going to do the breakout room because I think it's important that I give you as much information as possible. And take questions at the end, and then hopefully you can discuss it with colleagues, because it is taking me much longer than I realised. Grounding is a practice that can help us stay away from flashbacks and unwanted memories. So any children that we know that are particularly suffering with PTSD or struggling with emotions around certain topics, grounding can be really helpful. Particularly those as well that struggle with disassociation or just need to focus and bring themselves back to the present. Hands in cold water, again, it's going back to the temperature change. By focusing on the temperature, you're able to change the way that your brain works. Touch items. So if you've got a child that you feel is disassociating, get them to hold on to the sides of the chair, ask them to tap the side of the chair, ask them to stand up. Because if you've got a child, I had a child last year that was just, totally disassociated. They're not taking in, they're not listening to anything you're talking about until they are moving and they are present. So it's about doing things so that they can be focused. Deep breathing, changing temperature, touching things, looking things, so that they are more present. When I have a child who is particularly struggling, one of the first things that I discuss with them or talk to them about is sleep hygiene, because I think most of us probably know if we don't have a very good night's sleep, things can start to go terribly wrong and our mood can decline, our focus can decline. So sleep hygiene is really important. A lot of children haven't necessarily heard of that and they're just like, oh yeah, I go to bed early enough, or so it's about putting these things in place that they don't always realise. So some will go home and nap after school. If you are going to nap, it should be limited to 30 minutes. Anything over that can trick your body into thinking that it has actually had a sleep. Exercising can promote good quality sleep. So exercising on an evening can be helpful. Avoiding rich, spicy or fatty foods close to bedtime. So we sort of say don't eat after 7 o'clock if you can. Adequate exposure to natural light, so go outside. Some children that don't leave the house and stay in a lot, this can be quite difficult for them. And these children who are not attending with us and that are spending a lot of time in the house, these self-soothe and emotional regulation skills and mindful skills are really important for them. Have a regular bedtime routine. Ensure you have a pleasant sleep environment. So I said before that I struggle with anxiety. One of my biggest triggers is mess. So my bedroom is just a bed. There's no telly, there's no shoes out on show. It is a bed, it is chest of drawers on the side and everything goes into them and it is closed. So my bedroom is a bedroom and I go in and sleep. If I went in and there was clothes on the floor and there was this, that and that, I could not sleep. I'd have to get up and sort it. So it's important that the environment is suitable for you, because that can be even more of a trigger and it can stop people sleeping without them realising. How good do we feel if we've cleaned the house and we've had a good tidy up and things just feel in order? Probably one more for the adults and the children, but avoiding caffeine or energy drinks towards bedtime. I think we all know that has the opposite effect. Okay, super quickly then, sort of going on to what I've just talked about, but it's just introducing you to some of the things that we use in school. So once I've got this booklet, it would be based on an individual basis. So all of the skills that I've just quickly ran through, are all in this booklet. Now, depending on the needs of the child, whether it's linked to anger, whether it's linked to anxiety, whether it's self-harm, whether it's non-attendance and staying at home, we have lots of different children with lots of different needs. We would look at this and try and work out which would be the most appropriate skills to try with them. My advice is to just try one skill. Use one skill, embed it before you try another one. You don't want to overuse skills, and they need to be used at the right time. A 5-point scale is something I use with some of our children to help them identify when they might need to use these skills. So if we take an example of angry, it might be that, I'll put a picture on there, but we do it different to the picture. So I'm going to take that slide up so I don't confuse you. So a 1 is when a child is feeling okay, things are good. I hope you can see that, because I can't. I think that's why I'm struggling to read this, because I can see everyone's faces. I can't see my slides very well. So 1 is just feeling really relaxed, and there might not be any skills or actions from that, because then they're doing okay. By the time you get to 5, it might be that the child is ready to explode, and that is literally worst case scenario. So what we talk about when we do this 5-point scale is we always do it with the child, and we try to get to the bottom of how it feels. So hopefully you can see that this is one that I did with a child last year. We realised that by the time they get to a 5, they can hear a buzzing. They know that their breathing is faster. Their vision goes funny. They might feel a little bit sick. Then we've put some things in place. So actually, by the time they get to 5, they need to be splashing cold water on their face, and they need to be using their timeout card. They need to come to us. It may be, so you might notice there, I really hope you can see. On number 4, we've done then focusing on mint. So this one was anxiety, so they were starting to become more anxious. Taste is a key one. Which I haven't gone over today, but if you've got someone who is feeling particularly anxious or unfocused, by making a harsh taste, it's a sensation that is very different. So you may have got the feeling before, when you've had salt and vinegar crisps, for the first 2 seconds, it's like you get like a little cramp in your mouth or like a little burn. So those feelings and those sensations can actually help you be mindful, because it pinpoints your brain straight away. So it could be that that's a mint, or it could be that it's something salty, or it could be a sour sweet, or it could be, something really strong. And the idea is that it can help them then just focus their emotions, their feelings on one particular thing for that time. So there's lots of different things, but we made this, and we make this, we've got quite a few with the children. Some of them are a lot more blank because it takes them time, but as things are happening, we go back and it's like, well, how are you feeling? Because it's important where possible that this comes from the child. And I do try and incorporate the skills from the booklet. On the back of the booklet also is useful contacts. There are loads more than this, so I've just put a couple on there that's on the back page of the booklet. The reason I do that is because if the children are taking the booklets home, I don't want them to feel overwhelmed if they're in a position where they feel they need to self-harm and they're unable to focus on the booklet. Therefore, it is just call this number. So they then got that to hand. I do also share it with parents, because once a child, following discussion with the child, because once a child has got something they find helpful, it's good then, because sometimes they need prompts from their parents or carers or whoever is around them to do it. So this 5-point scale, sometimes they need prompting from us or from the class teachers, but the point is to just help. So today I've given you, it's incredibly weird that I've just talked to no one and I can barely see my slides, so I'm really sorry if it hasn't really made much sense. There's lots of information that I've given you, and I know that. Tracy, I'm going to email her 2 copies of the booklet. The first one is an online version. The second one is an easy print, because I'm not very good with technology and I don't understand how to print booklets. So you guys can make whichever one of them work. Can I please ask though that you don't give them to any children without going through the skill first? So explain to them what it means, when they could use it. It might be that you just give them one page of the booklet and you don't give them the whole booklet. So if, for example, you discuss I don't know, the tip skill. That's always my go-to. That feels like an easier one. It might be that you just give them the page of tip and you might say at some point this week, when you feel like this, I want you to try this for 30 seconds and then let's see how it goes. The point of this isn't to take lots of your time, it's to support the work that a lot of us are already doing with children. And I get one of the reasons I did it is I get increasingly frustrated with parents and children and staff without the meaning to of people who are saying they're waiting for CAMS, they're waiting for support. Okay, what support? Because we've got some skills here that we can give you. So go and give this a try. Go and do this, because actually what we want is, yes, if children have significant mental health difficulties, that they get that support that they need, but also we want to help children develop independence, because seeing someone from CAMS or seeing their GP is not going to take their emotions away, and it's not going to take any problems away that they might face, and it's not going to increase their window of tolerance. So it's about us helping them understand and think of things that they can do to deal with them. Some of us have this naturally, like the pros and cons. Some of us might just flick that in our head and do it naturally, but some of our children will need us to teach them specifically. So, does anyone have any questions? Okay, so either no one has any idea what I've talked about for the last hour, or it was really clear. Hopefully it was the second one. I'm hoping that you can use some of the skills, and that it will benefit, you know, even if it benefits one child with one skill, it makes all the hours worth it. If you have got any questions, please email me or give me a call and I'll happy go through it over the phone of some situations. Because it's sometimes easier to discuss it in a specific situation, but please don't bombard children with the skills like I've done to you guys tonight. Please just give them one at a time and try and give them some examples of when they can use them. But I really hope it's been of some use, even if it's, oh, I'll send you a blank copy of the 5-point scale as well, and hopefully some of those can be helpful to you.